What are the top skills that are important for every leader and change maker in the future?
The ability to experiment, to a certain extent, what you said, to experiment, to not hold my assumptions as brittle truth, but to hold them lightly. And to always be thinking, what other small thing can I do going forward that will allow me to learn? So Eric Schmidt said it's the companies with the highest speed of learning or capacity for learning that will win in this new economy. And I believe that that holds true for human beings as well. The other one is
Diana, I'm very excited to have you on the Core Impact podcast. And first of all, congratulations on being ranked the #1 futurist in the world.
thank you.
The first question I would like to ask you, what does a futurist mean to you?
Well, it means to me that we're thinking not only about the present and the short term, but it means that we're thinking about building better futures. So some of the key aspects of thinking about the future are time perspective, past, present, and future, um, a sense of the system as a whole, um, a sense of agency, I think, that is lacking right now about people's desire to maybe not have control, because none of us can really have that, but to feel like we have a certain influence over the direction of our own futures. And all of those things, you know, I can bring it up to the company level as well, where leaders are thinking and inspiring their people to think about a future that matters. So that's what it means to me.
Thinking about the future of work, do you think we should be more fearful or excited?
The whole point of what I just described is that I want people to feel more excited. I feel like the stories we tell about the future influence our decisions today. And so if I would bring it down to a kind of simple analogy, if you are all sitting in a meeting room and somebody comes in and says, there's going to be a fire, everybody starts going, oh my God, you know, and like stressed and looks to what they might pick up or runs around. But if you're sitting in the same meeting room with the same group of people and somebody says, there's somebody coming and they're going to bring $1 million checks for all of us, like the totally different energy and kind of conversation happens in the room. And so on a very basic level, I don't think fear is a bad thing. I think that fear that can inspire us to make different decisions. For instance, about AI right now, where if we think that things, that there are multiple scenarios in the future and one of them's really bad, and we fear that, then we can actually take steps to avoid that and maximize the possibilities of the other one. So, well, I don't think fear is bad. If it moves us to action and particularly preventative action, um, then that's fine. But I think it's important for us to realize how those stories impact what's even possible, what we imagine today.
Diana, talking also about the future of work, is there something that you've learned during the last 12 months that changed your perspective?
That changed my perspective. Well, I moved from 20 plus years living in Hong Kong to the United States. And while I know that in my conversations with Nicholas Bloom at Stanford, that work from home was a huge movement in the US and has been across different countries, the lived experience was quite different. Moving from a place in Hong Kong where it's a city but small, you can get to things quickly, people would like to be in the office, it's quite social, to moving to the US and in a company that has quite a lot of remote workers where the requirements for people to feel like they belong and work together and all of those things. That has just been this kind of small lived experience. And then, of course, the giant change around the future of work is AI and the changes that take place every day, really. As a futurist, I spend my time helping to brief our senior leadership and helping customers figure out how they can go into the future and then research and thought leadership. But it really is extraordinary how much things are changing and balancing that kind of transform at pace and speed and perform in the moment is something that I think is the kind of crisis of the day or opportunity of the day.
Mm. Would you like to tell me what do you see the biggest mistakes that companies make when they think of integrating AI in their processes?
I feel like most of it is quite context based. So while it would play well on social media to say the one mistake that people make, implementing and maybe that is the biggest mistake is to take something that everybody else is doing and trying to apply it to your context without thoughtful understanding of what you're trying to do. I wrote a paper interviewing a lot of people, not just on AI, but emerging technology with my colleagues at the Future Work Forum. And one of the things that was universal was the idea of having a purpose, not being technology led, like, oh, there's this cool thing we could do, so we'll just do it, rather than thinking like, what is the business case for this? So that would be one, having a customer problem usually that you can rally around, and then figuring out whether or not the technology is useful for that, and then having a structured process to innovate and measure and scale. So none of those things are new, but certainly we um, make the same mistakes as human beings. And frankly, I think the AI makes the same mistakes again and again, perhaps trained by human beings. Really being thoughtful, not being thoughtful, and um, and implementing, which I don't see a lot, implementing as though whatever you put in is not going to change. But this is something that people are going forward, they're trying things, they're learning from each other. We have a futures council where people who are doing AI business reinvention can come and say, this is what I did. This is how I struggled with it. This is how it worked. This is the advice I can give you. And to me, that seems like a really useful way forward when we're in this more liminal time where I don't think anybody really knows what the outcome will be. And we know that there's a opportunity to transition, but you need to come together with other people who are doing that to really understand what's possible and learn from.
While you are listening to the Core Impact podcast, please take a moment to pause and share with me. How do you feel? Are you enjoying the conversation, feeling inspired, or something else? I would love to know your feelings in the comments. How can we connect purpose with profit in business in our daily activities? The possibility of us living a purposeful and at the same time profitable career for us and for our companies will increase in the future, from my understanding. Is it right?
I don't think that that's a given.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I'm working for,
Mm.
for sure. Um, if you right now are a trucker and you want to continue on your life, you're really good, you've been doing it for a while, you're somebody people rely on, you know the best routes, you know the people at the stops, you have relationships, um, your life's pretty good. People choose you because you figured it all out. If you just think about that and then think about the sort of Uber economy and platform economy, this person now gets chosen based on availability and geographic location. And the GPS will route the most efficient route. And there's less autonomy in that. And maybe you're capacity utilization goes up, um, the amount of hours you work. But suddenly you have less autonomy. You're less special in and unique in the way that you show up in the world. And frankly, I worry about that because we can have really efficient companies and we can have people who, are directed to do things more efficiently. But I don't necessarily think that that's the world I'm looking to build. I think that those are the trade offs that right now we're even uncovering as we go forward. Um, and my desire is to figure out how humans and machines collaborate in a way that is profitable because business needs to be profitable. If it's a for-profit organization, it needs to give back to shareholders, but there is an element of that kind of long-term thinking whereby this has effects. Like people will change, their expectations will change, but it is a big design experiment right now. And I think being mindful that that is the outcome, that sense of a career with purpose and profit, if that's something we keep in mind, then I think that we can absolutely build it, but I don't think it's a given. Did that depress you?
No, I I'm really open, and this is something I love about the podcast. I get the opportunity to talk to business leaders like you, and it always broaden my perspective. And I always have to be humble to say, okay, I have some maybe sometimes assumptions, and I come challenge them with you, and then I know that okay, there are always other possibilities, but I try not to have any expectations. There are so many interesting things that we can link with the future and the future of work. One of them is, and this is a question I like to ask my guests, but especially with you, I would like to expand it a bit. So usually I ask, what are the three top skills you think that are important for every leader and change maker in the future? And with you, I'm going to say five because I know that you are already focusing on this.
I'm going to bring it back to like I study that. I have written about that in Future Proof, Reinventing Work in an Age of Acceleration. I wrote that book just before COVID. And I think that ironically, most of those skills, very specific skills or capacities or virtues, I think I called it in the book, I think those still stand.
Mm.
The ability to experiment to a certain extent, what you said, to experiment, to not hold my assumptions as brittle truth, but to hold them lightly. And to always be thinking, what other small thing can I do going forward that will allow me to learn? Um, so Eric Schmidt said it's the companies with the highest speed of learning or capacity for learning that will win in this new economy. And I believe that that holds true for human beings as well. So in my book, it's experiment, it's reinvent, because the things that we'll do will inevitably have a shelf life because we live longer. And we need to always be looking at the adjacencies. So a lot of the conversation right now about um, jobs and maybe the loss of jobs is about people doing one thing, a software engineer who wants to stay a software engineer and maybe that market has moved on or has changed. So what are the adjacencies? What else? It's like if I'm a taxi driver, can I become a drone pilot because I know all the maps? I don't know. That's something that in this initial book was really about individuals being able to do this for themselves. The other one is to collaborate. That was a huge one. I still believe in that. Connection is something important to me. And I think that it's nice to have a person challenge your assumptions and have a conversation about it. But truly, when people say, "Oh, what will the people do when the AI does all the execution?" I always say, you suck at being a human. Really, we all kind of suck at being humans. We don't have good conversation. We don't know how to love each other. We don't know how to work together. I mean, when I was teaching an MBA class, the third rail was, tell me about a group project that went wrong. Oh my God. And you could say the same thing in any company, any team. Maybe we can spend more time on that. So, that collaboration and I think from a like futurist perspective in terms of the future of AI, I think very much that the handoff spaces are an interesting opportunity. AI is still creating new possibilities in verticals like in HR and IT, et cetera. But that opportunity for synthesis across them and the opportunity for better handoffs, I think, is an interesting technological problem. And then the other one is focus, because we don't know how to focus anymore and we don't know what to choose. And the problem was in the past when I was growing up, and people still believe this to a certain extent, it was easy to tell somebody what to choose. You want to make money, go into banking. You want to, you know, make an impact, be a doctor, whatever it was. And then you just do that for the rest of your life. Um, the level of uncertainty is is quite high, so it's much more difficult. So you have more agency over what to focus on, but that's really daunting for most people. Never mind the fact that in most places, every piece of the system is designed to invite you to focus elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, I think that that's a real muscle, and discipline that people still quite need. So those are the virtues that I wrote about that I still hold those to be true. The other ones that we always see, in the World Economic Forum, they continue to be important, but at the end of the day, it's like thinking for yourself. Like what they would call critical thinking, I might say, think for yourself, make relationships. I have 3 kids who are, like in teens and 20s. So like I think about them, like what are they going to do in an AI era? Make friends, think for yourself, think deeply, find something to care about. Those things make you adaptable and allow you to sustain yourself through no matter what comes. So new tech, same humans.
So, Diana, if I want to repeat them in a nutshell, the first one is experiment or the capacity for learning. The second one is reinvent. The third one is collaboration. The fourth one is focus. And the last one is think for yourself, as you called it, instead of critical thinking. And also, it's about adaptability. The second point, I find it, I mean, all of them are very interesting. And I can think about every one of them and reflect on each one of them. And the second one is interesting because also there's something that I find about the future of work. It's what I assume people will be less attached to their titles and more to what does it mean to work in this, or what do you want to work in the future in more details, and you focus more about, for example, the job description rather than what the title of the job is. And that comes back to what you were saying about reinvent or work in a cross-functionally, for example, between different departments, have either the experiences from different fields or also the skills, right? Because so many things are going to change, and here you can be more adaptable. Is it clear? And do you agree on this?
I think we all, in an effort to focus, look for the headline, and that's a human nature. So I think of our job accumulation of skills and experiences as a mosaic. So, one of those little tiles and you put some tiles and then it looks like a picture. But then if you have to keep adding tiles, the picture changes. Or sometimes I think of it as a kaleidoscope. Spin it, you might have the same stuff, but the picture changes. And I do think that there's been a lot of talk over years at this point of flow to work where, we'll all come together. And I work like this in the innovation office. We come together around a project, the same way maybe a Hollywood movie is made. We all pitch in with our different expertise. I have a colleague who is really good at quantum, and he also used to work at Wall Street. Another one he used to be in sports and entertainment, and she just has a very methodical mind. Like we all have different things, and we are a small enough group that we know a bit about each other's strengths. So when we come together, one of the engineers is really good at user interfaces, another engineer is really good at thinking through how things connect. Another person, I used to work for Kissinger, and so like the whole ministerial storyline and being able to tell that, like we'll swarm around this project, we'll do it, and then we'll break apart when it's over. And I think that that's something you'll see more and more. Does that entail a job description? I mean, I still think that people will go, that's the so and so person, right? Like the same way that you called me because, oh, she's the number one futurist. It's like shiny packaging that
Mm,
is interesting to us. And one of the things I think is important is for us to be able to tell that story in the way that brings people and projects to us that are interesting. But I think that we'll have to cultivate the skills to um, continue invest in that example. Maybe for me, it's like to continue to invest in the ability to swarm around a project that's increasingly being done in new coding languages that I don't know. Even if it's being vibe coded, like I need to know how everything's going underneath so that we can really get the auditability of it. Maybe another person needs to invest in their storytelling. So you can see, right? Like we come together, collaboration is really important. We need to form quickly. We need to understand how to communicate and articulate our value to other
mm,
people. Like this is what I can contribute. Um, we need to understand and appreciate the other person's value and the nuances, and then figure out how that all comes together to really give an output that we want to give something that's better than if we each did it individually. So I think that's important. When you said job description, it hit wrong because I feel like that still implies that we have very specific jobs where the tasks don't change and this is what we do
mm,
and
mm,
whatnot. I think it's more like um, more like a tagline almost, or more like you know, maybe that's what LinkedIn did to us is sort of that one line that you have in LinkedIn that says, this is what I think is interesting about me that you should know.
mm, mm. I remember also that you said one time that it's important for each person to know what legacy they want to leave. And I'm curious to know what is the legacy that you want to leave.
I want to help people craft inspiring futures that matter. And I want the best possible future for the most possible people.
And also, you call soft skills as smart skills, right? Why?
Back to the idea that we're not so great at being human. I taught a leadership and interpersonal dynamics course at the business school and was quite inspired by Stanford Business School's touchy feely course, um, where there's a certain amount of self awareness that is required and other awareness for you to be grounded and able to communicate and see other people's genius and lead them to interesting solutions to problems or new ideas or possibilities. And in all of my consulting and in all of my life, I just think like we're it's very rare. I would say anybody who gets to, a couple decades into their career can remember the moments when they had a team and a project that was inspiring. And it's not as frequent as you would hope.
And I'm not surprised by that, to be honest. I'm a bit surprised that it's my assumption also again that is coming from you, because I was assuming that, when you are someone who's living your purpose and you're very successful and you are known also an author and well-known speaker, etc., then your environment will be different. But also that it's coming from you, it's something that it hits different for me.
No, there's no like magic nirvana where you go, oh, finally, I have enough. You know, there's an amazing author, Jennifer Wallace, who wrote a book about mattering. And she talks about status safeguarding. I mean, she originally started looking at children and school and how we ask our children or kind of put our children towards the skills that are more technical, towards the status jobs, because we want to safeguard their status. We work so hard to become whatever we are, to have the money we have, to have this sense of enough. And I think that the more you go forward, you realize that for most people, there's never enough. And part of the reason is that we've ceased to think about mattering as one of the key fundamentals of life. And I do feel like that's been a focus. That was an aha moment having her on our Future Proof Masterclass, because a lot of the people I work with have been CEOs, they've been the top of the heap, and they're looking out to say, wow, it's been nice that everybody thinks I'm, you know, worth looking up to because of my title, usually. And most people get their titles because they've worked damn hard to get there. So, I believe in that, but but then what? Like, do they matter without their title? I think that's this like moment in a lot of people's lives that I've worked with where they say, now actually I do want to matter. That's more important. That shift from success to significance, which is a bit about legacy. But legacy doesn't have to continue on in this like, look at me, I have a legacy moment. It is the mattering. It is, who are the people that I can contribute to or the community that I can contribute to. And I mean, I think that that matters more than ever in this moment that we're in, where Back to the Future and the sense of a future, many people have just decided to shut down and say, well, I don't have a lot of input or influence on that. I'll just go on autopilot. That is my sense of some of the reaction to a lot of volatility and uncertainty in the world.
Diana, there's something else that I'm interested to hear from you about, that you travel a lot and also you've been in Hong Kong, for example, and you could see different cultures from different perspectives. I'm curious to see, how do you see the evolvement of diversity and inclusion, the awareness of it at workplaces in the future?
From the perspective of biodiversity, creating more robust systems, I think that it's important. I think that in this moment, being in the United States, there's clearly a huge backlash against what is perceived as a pendulum that swung too far towards maybe specific ideas. But it seems like a tremendous shame to throw out the idea of diversity, the idea of plurality. I mean, it goes back to the collaboration. If you can be top of the hill by beating everyone else to death, then good for you, right? I mean, it seems to me like a kind of a lonely existence and not a particularly sustainable one. I do travel a lot, and what I find is um, that many people across Asia, which I'm quite familiar with, are just going on with their lives. And diversity shows up differently in every single country, and in every single city that you go to in quite different ways, and the needs are different. Um, so, from that perspective, I think that the US in particular seems a little bit like, on this issue and many others, a tempest in a teacup. Sadly, the teacup is long since broken apart. The tempest is a little bit more global than we'd like. But on from the perspective of diversity, we still have a long way to go to figure out how those things can evolve. Because the reality is that, for example, men and women are now both in the workplace. As much as you'd like to repeal that, the reality is that we have less people. For most places, we've reached peak population and or will in the next 10 years. And so most people are being required to work. Who knows what'll happen with AI? Um, my old boss, Henry Kissinger, used to say, there will never be an end to the war between men and women because there's too much fraternizing with the enemy. But diversity is far greater than just gender. I don't know. I think that it's important to try and continually evolve. And I don't subscribe to the idea of going backwards and nostalgia for times gone by being, that's not a panacea to me in my own life.
Diana, is there any question that I haven't asked you, and maybe nobody asked you in the past in any podcast, but you find is important to ask about the future of work and you like to answer?
Most of the questions that I have are ones that I can't answer.
Ah,
um, and it really is a genuine curiosity that we have intellectually extraordinary ideas about how the future might unfold. But when it comes to actual people working together in a team, you can have the smartest people in the room and still not come to an extraordinary result. So that's not a question that I can answer, but it's definitely a question that I'll spend the rest of my life researching. So that's a question you can answer to or ask to one of your other guests. And once you get the answer, you can come back and tell me. How about that?
by the way, I can ask you a question that is also from the previous guest, not directly, since you mentioned this. Describe a moment when you've felt a connection with something bigger than you. That was a question from Yvette Erasmus. She's a psychologist, also well known for nonviolent communication.
Well, there's two moments that pop into my head. One of them launched me on the futures path. I did a workshop on the future of work, and it was probably 10 or more years ago. And it was with a nonprofit group called the Asia Foundation, and it was for young leaders in Southeast Asia. And it was Future of Work, and they came together, and I got the Institute, IFTF, the Institute for the Future from Silicon Valley in, and they explained their futures methodology. And all of the teams came together from all over. around how they could collaborate across ASEAN nations on specific goals: trust, building trust, digital literacy, five others. So that was a project where we used technology because we were like, we could use Miro boards. It's going to be cool and everybody's going to swarm. And we had people in Myanmar that had to travel an hour to an internet cafe just to get on the internet. And they didn't have enough bandwidth to get on a Miro board. And this is at the same time when I was teaching an MBA class where people were like, it wasn't exactly like I wanted it. And then this kid in Myanmar is like traveling, and in her group, they figured out that they could take a snapshot of the Miro board, WhatsApp it to her. She could look at it, describe the Post-it note that she wanted to put on the Miro board, and one of her teammates in Singapore would do that for her. And I was like, these kids are unstoppable. And what the container and the structure that I have put together, that we collectively put together for them to come together is magic. And that is, it was one of those projects where people cried at the end that it had to stop. And so that was the sense that, like, those moments are ones where it can be for the greater good. And, that really made me realize the foresight methodologies and the power of giving some of those tools for people to build a better future and come together in better conversations. And I think the second one was I have been taking people to Mongolia for a couple of years. And that is another place where it is truly kind of plugging into the different archetypes that we have in the stories. And I ran the retreat with somebody else who's a somatic therapist. Uh, when we can get off grid in a beautiful place and think about the stories of our lives and be under a vast blue sky, um, like, it really strips things away. And that was another moment where I thought, yeah, people have been doing this since the beginning of time. We're not particularly special, but I can be a conduit for people to realize their best futures. It's not really about me. It's just my place in this longer story.
I've heard this in different ways, the sentence that you just said in the end, from different guests on the podcast or other people who inspired me a lot. It's not about me. It's really like when you live this, it's about your purpose. Like, how can you serve others, right? You look at what is unique in you because everyone knows that they are unique. What are the gifts that you have? And then how can you serve others with it?
Yeah.
Diana, the question I would like to end the podcast with is, how do you celebrate life?
I think that you can celebrate life in the smallest ways by noticing all the beauty and joy around you, and on the days that I really think about celebrating life, I wake up and I'm like, I love my coffee. Isn't this amazing? I mean, I really make the best cup of coffee. And the fact that I can wake up in the morning and celebrate, with this coffee just the way I like it, it can be as simple as that. Living in New York right now, I feel like the celebration of life is walking down the street because people in New York are absolutely crazy. Like, I walk to work in 20 minutes and 100% guaranteed I will see somebody who has spent an hour, would take me an hour, of their day dressed head to toe in the same color with like sparkly glasses and, or, I mean, maybe they are covered in tinfoil, or maybe they've decided to go down and play, busk in the subway for free and they're rocking out. And like, to me, that is such a celebration that it's made It's made it really fun to be here. So I think, how do I celebrate? Like, of course I celebrate with family and friends, but oftentimes it's just an attitude of celebration about what I notice around.
Thank you very much, Diana. I really enjoyed the conversation, also your calm energy and the topics we talked about. I would not ask you any more questions now. I would just give you the space to give any final thoughts or call to action for anyone who's listening to us.
Well, for a long time, people would ask advice after I wrote my book, and also when I did my first TED Talk. Um, I have a website, dianawoodavid.com, and I did really ages ago come up with 13 questions that help people think about some key pillars of life that are important. And it does have to do with people to celebrate with. It has to do with a sense of purpose. So I think if there are people who are searching for something like that, a sense of groundedness or purpose, then that's a good place to start.
Thank you for the insightful conversation, Diana. Wish you all the best with all your future projects.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast, Omar.
Thank you, Diana. Congratulations for listening until the end. You are in the top 25% of listeners. Studies show that we forget up to 70% of what we hear within 24 hours. But when we repeat an insight by sharing it with someone, commenting, or journaling it, it moves into long-term memory. So now tell me, what are your 1 to 3 takeaways you're keeping from this conversation? Enjoy every moment. Until next time.